Hello, my name is Dale Adams of Planning Ahead of Time, and this week's Pat Chat is with Kate. Kate, would you like to introduce yourself?
I would love to, thank you. So I am Kate T. I'm one of the Kates of Coffin Club and also Kate and Kate Celebrants. And we're also soon to become Matched and Dispatched Celebrant Training.
Okay. Oh, okay. So there's a new offering on the cards then.
Yes, we already do celebrant training, but just for funeral celebrants. And because we want to also now train wedding celebrants, we're separating that from Coffin Club. So yes.
Match.
Why have one business when you can have three?
Well, yes, I'm like that because I have multiple businesses in various areas as well.
Yes,
But
yes.
I love the name Match and Dispatch. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
It's really good. So it's Kate and Kate, and you're both award-winning celebrants.
We are, yes. So we've won um oh, the trophy cabinet, as you can see, is so full. We won Celebrant of the Year in, I think, 2018, and we've been nominated again this year for Celebrant of the Year at the Good Funeral Awards. So that's as Kate and Kate Celebrants. And then as Coffin Club, we were runner-up for Best Funeral Information Provider, and then we won it for 2 years running. And again, we're a finalist for they've changed the category, so I think it's now something like Best Funeral Support Organization. All the sexy titles, that's the ones that we win.
Brilliant. So how did you two meet, and how did Coffin Club come to be?
Well, we met because we both worked as marriage registrars for East Sussex County Council very many moons ago. I think it's probably like we started about 20 years ago or something. And yeah, I don't know, a long time ago. And thoroughly enjoyed that, but reached a point where we were kind of like, we'd like to do something more bespoke. We'd like to really work with our couples and find out all about them and be more creative. So being a celebrant was a sort of natural step. So we did that. We didn't have to do any training for weddings because obviously we'd done training as registrars. But the natural bedfellow for being a wedding celebrant is to be a funeral celebrant. Otherwise, you're kind of limited to when you just work in the summer. You're only really working on Saturdays mainly. And we thought really long and hard about being funeral celebrants because we were a little bit scared, to be honest. It seems weird now because we're like, death advocates and we're all about talking about death and funerals. But at the time, we were part of the normal world who's a little bit death averse, and a little bit like, oh, death, that's going to be really hard and scary. And we really felt the weight of responsibility that, to hold space for people at that time, we really should know what we are doing. So we went and did some training, which were not very good.
I wasn't quite sure what you were about to say then.
Yeah, it was pretty rubbish, really. And it was very, here's a template, 20 minutes at the creme, rinse and repeat. That's what you'll be doing. And we both were a bit, okay, is that it? And then we started getting funeral work through funeral directors, and it very much was like that. And I think both of us were quite underwhelmed by that. We were like, people have lived long and interesting lives, and then their last hurrah is this very standardized, everybody gets the same. And really it shouldn't be like that. So because we went to lots of wedding venues, we started talking to them about hosting funerals. And they were very much kind of, what, with the coffin there. And we were like, yeah, with the coffin there, it'll be absolutely fine. Churches do funerals in the week and weddings at the weekend. Nobody freaks out about that. So we got loads of wedding venues on board for hosting funerals. Went and talked to our local funeral directors, said, would you offer this to families that come to you? And they basically said no. And when we said why not, they said nobody's ever asked for it. And we were kind of like, well, yeah, no one's ever asked for it, because if they don't know it exists, you know, you don't know what you don't know, do you? You don't know what to ask for. So we thought, right, we're going to tell people that these options exist, because actually the funeral world is very unregulated. You know, you can celebrate a life any way you like at all. You can separate the cremation or burial from the celebration of life. Just do a family only committal, do a direct cremation, or do a whole thing. But, you know, I've done it where I've done the committal bit with all the guests, everybody at the crematorium, and then we've all gone back to the back garden and continued the service there with no time restriction, lovely setting, straight into eating and drinking, and, you know, so you can do anything. So that was how Coffin Club was born, because we sort of thought, yeah, people don't know anything at all about funerals. You know, we've completely done an ostrich until a time of need, and then we're not in a position to think creatively or ask difficult questions, of course, because we're bereaved. So we wanted people to, you know, plan ahead. We wanted to get people ahead of time, give them all their choices without judgment, so that they could make an informed decision. And if that decision was then to have 20 minutes at the creme, as long as it was an informed decision, we were okay with that. You know, if you know all your other choices, but you still then want to have 20 minutes at the creme, that's fine.
Yeah, Kate, you talking about judgment, I completely feel that that's what people need, is to be able to speak openly and honestly to others that understand, because there is so much you can do now. And even what you're talking about is making something that's unique to the person, and that's also a celebration, because it has to, in my opinion, be an element of both. Obviously, there's the grief and the fact that you've got to honor the person who's died, but they've also lived normally, hopefully, a long and quite amazing life. And that's what you're there to pay tribute to as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, if somebody had a brilliant sense of humor and was a real cheeky chappy, and, you know, to then have a very somber, yeah, I'm not talking about all circumstances. Some circumstances, if somebody's very young or it's particularly tragic, you know, people maybe can't get beyond that at that time. And that's fine. That's why I say without judgment, because you've got to meet people where they are. But if somebody has lived a really long and full life, and, you know, everybody is kind of at that point of acceptance that, you know, it was their time, we don't all live forever, then to celebrate their life in a way that's really appropriate to them, without this kind of, you know, what's respectful. You know, I actually think it's a funny word in the funeral world, because what makes a gentleman dressed in Victorian clothing respectful? You know, that wasn't respectful until Victorian times, when mourning became a huge industry. And we kind of got stuck with it, because I think of 2 world wars and the NHS taking death out of their home. But it doesn't mean that that's the only, you know, indicator of respect. Actually, doing something that is completely personal and really meaningful and relates to that person and how they lived their life, to me, that's kind of the ultimate respect. And it might be that they were very traditional and conservative, and what would indicate respect is all the Victorian trappings, because that was the kind of person they were. But I don't think that's now for everybody. And you only get one chance to do a funeral. There is nothing worse for me than people coming to Coffin Club because they had a bad experience of a funeral, and they carry that with them. They carry it with them that, oh, I don't think we got this right, or perhaps we should have done, or if I'd have known I could have done this, that's what I would have done, but I didn't know. And so I think it's really important that you do know, and then you get it right, because a funeral done right, whatever that is for you, because there isn't a right or wrong, is such an incredibly cathartic thing. It makes such a huge difference in the grieving process, in being able to move forward. So this stuff is really important, and we've become so disconnected from it that, it's almost like a shock. People are like, oh my God, people die and then they have to have a funeral. Oh, who knew?
But you're so right in the fact that it makes such a big difference if people feel that they got it right, that they really did honour the person in the way that they would have wanted to. And some of that, as you said, and it's what I do, is the planning ahead of time.
Yeah.
Making sure that people know what you would want, and they know how to put that together and who can put that together for them.
Yeah.
With Coffin Club, people will think, oh, Coffin Club, is it about making coffins? Is it sitting round a coffin? Maybe it's a little bit scary. What is it about, and why should people come?
So it's not scary at all. It's actually really lovely, very social, quite good fun. Initially it was about coffins. Initially it was about decorating coffins and funeral education. We actually took the coffin decorating out and made it a separate thing, because what happened was, once people were being educated about their choices, so they might find out that they could have a shroud, or they would find out that they could leave their body to medical science. All of a sudden they'd be like, oh, I don't actually want or need a coffin. So we were kind of like, okay, that's fine, we'll sort of change the model of how we do things. So it's very much a funeral education platform. There are clubs up and down the country, and they can formulate their course however they like. When we're very benign dictators, we don't really tell people, you've got to do it like this. As long as you're imparting information, we're quite happy, without judgment.
I love benign dictators. What a just wonderful.
So we don't expect people who run a coffin club to be, expert about everything. So we suggest they invite experts along. So you might have your local funeral director, manager of the creme, end of life doula or soul midwife, perhaps somebody who's organised a family-led funeral with no funeral director support, maybe somebody who knows about body donation or organ harvesting. So basically just everything to do with more specifically funerals than death and dying, because we had to kind of pick our niche. Otherwise it's such a broad area, you could just go on forever.
Yes.
And then people have a funeral wish list, so they can, like a birth plan, they can say what they would like, with the view that you don't necessarily, if you're not living with a terminal diagnosis, you don't necessarily know how you're going to die. So if you're in an enormous gas explosion and there's literally no bit of you left, that may change how your celebration of life actually happens. So with a view that this is, a best case scenario, an organic kind of document that may change. But yeah, just to really empower people to make these choices, because how can you make choices if you don't know what your choices are? So really, the one takeaway from Coffin Club is about talking to your family. And it's a great way of opening those conversations, because Nan goes home and says, oh, I went to Coffin Club this week and the kids go, coffee club. Coughing club, and she's like, no, coffin. And then that opens a conversation, because quite often people come and say, I've tried to talk to my kids, but they're so resistant to talking about it. And then sometimes if you throw in a, you know, oh, did you know that the average body takes an hour and a half to cremate, but it's longer if you died of cancer, then people are quite like, oh, that's interesting. Because people actually do like talking about death. If you were at a dinner party and you were next to a mortuary assistant or a funeral director, you would be like, oh my God, this is brilliant. I can ask them so many things. What we don't like to talk about is our own deaths, or the deaths of people that we love. Then we get, you know, a bit discombobulated, understandably. But I actually think it's not helpful to be in denial. It's actually better to find a degree of acceptance.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with you. And as you say, when people start talking about it, they're always interested to know more. I went to a Coffin Club in Margaret's memory, which is in Birmingham area. And they, again, brought in experts. So there was a doctor there and also somebody who helped with sort of your will writing, LPAs, etc. So as you say, they brought the experts in. It was really good, because Coffin Club is national, isn't it? So you've got these all across the country.
Yes, we have. I mean, it's sort of it keeps changing form because we've had to try to find a way to make it sustainable, because obviously it's not for profit. And so for quite a while, we were just financing it, which became almost impossible in the end. Then we were using, we do celebrant training of funeral celebrants, and that was supporting it, which is why we're now taking our celebrant training arm and changing that, because it's going to be weddings and funerals, in order that we can continue to support our not-for-profit bit, which is Coffin Club. So we've now set it up kind of more like a death cafe, where people can just set one up if they fancy it. It's kind of a much lighter touch on how it is controlled. Our benign dictatorship has got even more benign. Right. So we're just in the process of sorting out all the documentation for that and getting that. What we want to do is simplify it so that it's much easier for people to set up and run a coffin club. So that there are more coffin clubs, which gives more people access to this information and these conversations, because at the end of the day, that's what we want. That's what's important.
Well, I organise an event called Night of Our Light, where it's once a year on 3rd of November, and we light up as it's been till now, the local churches with hundreds of candles.
Oh, wow.
We've actually got a barrow getting involved, and also hopefully a lady up in Scotland's doing it. Might be something I could talk to you about separately, because I think it could blend in really quite nicely.
Yeah, I love that. I love a candle.
Yeah, love a candle. Celebrating the lives of people who've died, but that again brings with it people wanting to talk and hold conversations around.
Yeah, it used to be much more part of life because people died at home, and you know, the NHS, love the NHS, but it has taken death out of the home. And also the monetizing of funerals. Funeral directors will look after your dead person for you. Again, brilliant, because not everybody does want to keep their dead at home, and I completely understand that. But it means we have got this big disconnect. But I think people now are becoming much more aware about mental health issues, etc., etc. And I think they're realizing that actually we do need to talk about this stuff. You know, it's important that we do, and that we reconnect, because otherwise there just is this additional layer of kind of disbelief and shock. And, you know, not that death isn't shocking and unbelievable anyway, but I think it's kind of exaggerated if you have been completely in denial and, you know, not talking about it at all. And it's almost like giving people permission to be normal about it, that to stop doing this kind of talking in, you know, I'm sorry for your loss, and, you know, all a little bit weird, which is how we do talk about death. Coffin Club is very about just normalizing it. You know, this is what we're going to be talking about. You know, the whole trigger thing, you know, I don't think actually that's helpful because I think grief is triggered by all kinds of things. You know, when my dad died, I was 13 and he was 45, and he died of cancer. And when I had my children, I remember when my daughter first went from, you know, breast and bottle fed to a tippy cup, standing in my kitchen crying, because it just brought back this memory of my dad in hospital having to drink out of a tippy cup. And, you know, that's grief. Grief just comes at weird times. I don't actually think talking about death and funerals is necessarily the thing that is like, you know, and if you feel upset, that's fine. You know, if you need a moment, go outside, that's fine. But I think we can't tiptoe round forever going, we have to avoid all kinds of topics because, you know, it might upset people. It might upset people, but you know what? That's also okay. That's part of life.
Yeah, and I think ignoring it and trying to not talk about the person, not talk about the grief, not talk about the death is actually so much harder as well.
Oh, it's so damaging. You know, after my dad died, nobody talked about it at all. It was the 80s, and it was like that was considered best.
Yeah.
Absolutely so catastrophically damaging. You know, it's so much better to actually have these conversations.
Well, it's been very nice to have this conversation with you. So thank you for coming on a Pat Chat. How do people get hold of you or find out more about the Coffin Club?
Well, Coffin Club is at www.coffinclub.co.uk. Celebrant training will be at www.matchanddispatch.com. And if you are looking for a celebrant in our little corner of East Sussex, we are Kate and Kate celebrants.co.uk.
Lovely. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Kate.
Thank you. It's been really nice. I love talking deathy things. It makes my day.
Yeah, people think we're odd, but I agree with you.
We're the normal ones.
I think so.